recorded live. This is Researcher 135's Community Call, Daily Talk with host Rich Bernardo. Welcome to the JFK call-in show tonight. We'll be talking about the JFK assassination. We'll be having two important guests tonight, Jake Carter of JFK Facts, who will be discussing his new book that's coming out. We will also have Gayle Jackson, the daughter of the gentleman, Orville Nix, who filmed the other JFK assassination film, which has appeared in numerous documentaries, numerous shows, and where were you when? Anyone who was alive at the time of the JFK assassination remembers that it was the beginning of a tectonic shift. It was the beginning of a turbulence. One of the things we'll be exploring tonight, along with different conspiracy theories, along with the events that occurred on November 22nd, 1963, we'll be talking about the cultural and the societal impact of the JFK assassination on everyone, on the American society, on the United States as a whole. Our culture is replete with references to the JFK assassination. There was a Quantum Leap television episode, a time travel episode involving the JFK assassination. Some of you may remember Lieutenant Columbo, the Peter Falk character. There's a book out called The Grassy Knoll by William Harrington, in which Lieutenant Columbo goes to Dallas to try to get to the bottom of the assassination. Stephen King, a couple of years ago, had a book out, 11/22/63. Once again, another time travel involving the JFK assassination, where someone goes back and tries to prevent it. There was an excellent movie, Running Against Time, that involved that same theme, that same concept. There have been any number of books written, hundreds of them, since the terrible event occurred. And William Manchester wrote one of the definitive ones, of course, Death of the President. It's a huge volume. It details all of the events. And it seems that we already have a caller. Hello, caller.
Hi, Rich. It's Cherry.
And how are you this evening?
I'm just fine.
Well, tell me what you were doing when the JFK assassination occurred, when you first heard the news that President Kennedy had been shot.
Well, I was 10 years old, and we were in 5th grade class at our junior high school here in Illinois. And our teacher came in and announced it, and of course everyone started crying. We were not sent home, though. But I don't think anyone will forget where they were at when they heard the news that President Kennedy was killed.
Almost everyone nationwide was glued to their television sets and their radios during those 4 days, of course. And the events that occurred during those 4 days, the shooting of the accused assassin, Lee Harvey Oswald, by Jack Ruby on Sunday morning on nationwide television, the funeral itself on Monday, November the 25th. It was a mass consciousness event, a shared collective consciousness event in which all of the American people, and even worldwide to some extent, were riveted by the enormity of the tragedy, by the magnitude of what had occurred. It stands next.
Yeah, and even though that I was just 10 years old, of course, we were on Thanksgiving break, from school, and of course there was nothing else on the television, and so I spent, most of those, I would say, 4 days on the floor in front of the television watching it all unfold.
And almost from the very, very early days, right after those tragic events, the theories of conspiracy immediately began to surface. The attorney Mark Lane, very shortly after the assassination, interviewed Lee Harvey Oswald's mother, Marguerite Oswald, and he came out with a book called Rush to Judgment. Many years later, of course, Marina herself, Oswald's little girl, who later remarried and became Marina Oswald Porter, wrote a book about her years with Lee Harvey Oswald, both in the Soviet Union, where she met and married him, and then came back to the United States and continued, and then, of course, the events of the assassination, and then afterwards. It's called Marina and Lee, and it's another huge volume full of details, mostly her own personal accounts of her own experiences with Lee Harvey Oswald as his wife. One of the other books that's out that I read a couple of years ago is Bill O'Reilly's Killing of Kennedy. Again, he supports the lone gunman theory. A number of people support the Warren Commission finding of Lee Harvey Oswald being the lone assassin. A number of people don't. So they're divided into two camps as far as the conclusions go. There's a lot of problems, of course, with any theory. There's a lot of problems, of course, with the Warren Commission report. Mark Furman, whom everybody remembers, of course, from the O.J. Simpson trial, the policeman Mark Furman, he's written a book on the Kennedy assassination. Of course, he, once again, supports the lone gunman theory as Oswald as the only perpetrator, as does Vincent Bugliosi, the prosecutor who died just a couple of weeks ago at the age of 80. Everyone's familiar with Vincent Bugliosi from the Manson case, from the Helter Skelter. His book, of course, on the Kennedy assassination also points the finger at Oswald and tries to maintain that Oswald acted alone and was a lone gunman. Back in 1991, Oliver Stone came out with the movie JFK, which, of course, began to raise public consciousness again nationwide about the possibilities of a conspiracy. Much of Oliver Stone's material in the movie JFK was inspired by or influenced by Jim Garrison of New Orleans, who had launched his own investigation in the late 60s that even resulted in a couple of arrests. A guy named Clay Shaw was one of the people. And Garrison's book was called On the Trail of the Assassins. There have been any number of other books, too, that have pointed their fingers at the Mafia and the CIA as having been involved at some level. One of them was called Contract on America. David Scheim wrote that book. Excellent book. Another really good one, also, that explores the Mafia angle, The Kennedy Contract, The Mafia Plot to Assassinate the President. And that one's by John Davis. That, of course, deals with Hoffa and Marcello and Trafficante and some of the Mafia bigwigs of the time. And, JFK's younger brother, Robert, when he was Attorney General, had gone after the Mafia. So they had a vendetta of sorts against the Kennedys.
Yes, I would say that if anyone probably did it besides, helped Oswald or whatever, it was probably the Mafia. If anyone could have gotten away with it, it would have been the Mafia. If the way that it had been covered up, all of these years, the only ones capable of doing that, I believe, are the Mafia or, as you say, the CIA. But I still say that since it's never been proved, I believe that Oswald was the lone gunman. But that's always been up for debate, and it always will be. I don't think we'll ever know for sure.
I would say the physical evidence is absolutely damning in terms of him at least being one of the shooters, at least being one of the snipers, no question about it. The Mannlicher Carcano that had been mail-ordered, obviously traced to him, found there on the floor at the school book depository from which the shots were fired. Later, there was a palm print found on that same Mountaineer Carcano. The handgun used to kill Officer Tippit. That's another anomaly. Those who don't believe that Oswald was involved at all, some people believe he was simply a patsy and that he was completely innocent. There's many, many problems with that theory. All right, for example, the death of Officer Tippit. The evidence definitely points to Oswald as being the killer of Tippit, Officer Tippit.
Yes, that's almost undeniable right there.
And we have another caller from Northeast Texas. Good evening.
Hello, this is Jacob Carter.
Fantastic. This is one of my guests tonight. Welcome to the show. Tell me a little bit about yourself and about your connections with the JFK research.
Oh, well, my dad, when I was growing up, my dad was a history professor, and I was always really interested in history, and I stumbled across the case like a lot of people do. I watched Oliver Stone's movie in the early 90s, and when it came out in the early 90s, I watched it in the early 2000s, and then I got into the case, and I started studying it, and kind of never got out of it, and now I'm a social media manager for businesses, and I social media manage for JFKFacts.org, which is a website ran by Jefferson Morley, who is a longtime researcher within the field.
Tell us a little bit about that website, about JFK Facts. What are some of the things that one will find on there?
JFKFacts.org is one of the more credible websites. It is a website dedicated to reporting kind of just straight facts from the news, because the JFK case has kind of morphed into its own little deal now, where everyone is an expert and everyone has a theory. And so JFK Facts tries to pull in the most credible theories it can and tries to report them as best it can with the facts. And so Jefferson Morley is somebody who has dedicated years to the case, and he actually currently right now is trying to get a lot of the records from the CIA that they have on a caseworker they had that might have dealt with Oswald in 1963. And so he's constantly trying to report things and hold things accountable that other people might just let slip underneath the radar.
A lot of that material has become publicly available with the Freedom of Information Act some time back, and there's a lot of new material that's come out as a result of that, as I understand.
Yes. A whole lot has. I think it's become kind of a mystique that the government is withholding all of these files from the public, and that's just not the case. When you look at the facts, they've released probably around 5 million pages of documents, and the ones they haven't released, as they claim, they haven't released under national security. So, of course, the question is, if Lee Oswald was simply just a lone nut, and he kind of went off a short wire and went up and killed President Kennedy from the 6th floor window, then why would any file that has to relate to his assassination of President Kennedy need to be hidden in 2015? So when I say they're withholding files, what I mean is there's a very, very small percentage of files left that are due out legally under the 1992 JFK Records Act. They're due out in 2017. And so we don't know what's in these files fully. We have an idea, but we fully don't know. But it's definitely interesting, and it doesn't hurt to ask those questions.
The founder of the JFK Facts organization, based on his research, what is his dominant theory as to does he believe that Oswald acted alone? Does he believe there was a second gunman? And also, I understand you're writing a book. What theory have you come to the conclusion of in writing your book and doing your research?
Well, I think any credible researcher, and when I say researcher, because I think that has to be defined now, what makes somebody a researcher? If you go to Dealey Plaza, where President Kennedy was killed now, you have people handing out magazines and newspapers who claim they're researchers. But to me, what makes somebody a researcher is somebody who really can bring some evidence, possibly into court. And they really are on the scenes doing this. So to not sway too far and answer your question, as far as for Mr. Morley, I can't really speak on behalf of what he personally might believe happened. I believe he thinks there's more to it than just Oswald doing it alone. There are questions remaining about what the CIA knew about Oswald. And I don't think we're necessarily saying here that the CIA had President Kennedy killed and used Oswald to do it. I think what we're saying is what did they know about him? Did they know enough to stop it and they didn't? Or was someone in their group complicit in some way? And my book that I'm coming out with is filled with interviews with some of the top researchers on this case in the world. And the reason why I wanted to do that is because everyone has an opinion, but it's like any other field. If you want to know about brain surgery, you would go talk to a brain surgeon. So I didn't want to write another book with all of my theories in it and what I think and speculation. I wanted someone to be able to have a book where they could go to each theory and have the top researchers in the world on that particular theory and go ahead and study what they think, and then I'll let the reader decide for themselves. Because I don't think any researcher really knows what happened deep down. I think we have an idea of what happened. I think you can prove things by science, you can prove things about history and what time is told, but I don't think you can really rest and say, well, I know 100% what happened one way or the other. And that's where I kind of stand on my book. Now, I will say this, so I don't avoid the question completely. I'm a believer in Oswald's guilt. I don't think you can look at the case logically and say that if Oswald had been taken to trial, that they wouldn't have had physical evidence to convict him. They found his bullet up in the sixth floor museum. They found his rifle. He brought the rifle to work with him, allegedly. But most of all, his actions afterwards, where he's in the Texas school book depository, he's the only worker that leaves the depository. He goes home and gets a pistol and a jacket. He kills a police officer, which eyewitnesses saw him do. And then he goes into the movie theater. And what I always ask people is, if he was set up, then why did he punch a cop and pull a gun and try to shoot that cop in the face? And it just does not line up with somebody who's been set up.
Indeed, why was he the only worker missing from the school book depository immediately after the assassination? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, when they took roll at the Texas school book depository, my understanding is, and I'll have to check my sources, my understanding is that Lee Oswald was one of the only workers missing, if not the only worker from there, and that brought immediate suspicion towards him of what he was doing. Either way, if you're looking at human character, which is something people don't look at in this case a lot, if you're looking at the human nature of man, for you to leave the scene of a crime shows guilt. And I don't, you can go all the way and say, well, he was all set up and they put these bullets there and put the rifle there and all that. But one of the questions I ask is how did he know he was set up that fast? And when the police officers asked him, why did you leave work? And he said, well, with all the events going on, I figured that we would, we'd be off work early, so I wanted to go watch a movie. And they asked, why did you take your gun with you to the movie? Well, because I felt like it.
Let's take a look at his actions inside the movie theater. As the police officers moved in on him, as you'll recall, he did put up a struggle. There was an altercation with one of the officers. In fact, Oswald received a cut above his eye, which comes out during a late-night press conference many, many hours later. And that Officer McDonald, that pistol almost went off. There could have been another officer wounded in that altercation had circumstances not worked out the way they did. So obviously he did resist within the movie theater, which once again is an indication of guilt.
Yes, and you're correct on that. And he did resist, and as soon as he came out in public, he started screaming, "I am not resisting arrest. I protest this police brutality." But